Hello. So first, who am I? So my name is Christopher Elisan. Currently, I'm the principal malware scientist in RSA NetWitness. I'm also the author of Malware Rootkits and Botnets. It's currently out right now. It's available in Amazon. So it's for my kids' college fund, so buy one if you can. And my past adventures before I joined RSA, I was with Dambala for 3 years, from 2009 to 2012, F-Secure 2006, 2009, Trend Micro 1998, 2006. So I was fortunate enough that after college, I went directly into Trend Micro, so my first job was reversing malware. And you can follow me at Twitter, @Tops. I usually don't put stuff there, usually just announcement, but still, some things might be interesting. So what's the aim of the talk? Usually I would put a long agenda, but I think it's much more easier just to put there the aim of the talk, and that is to understand the threat ecosystem. So what is a threat ecosystem? The way I defined it, it's an interdependency of different technologies and the people behind them. So it's similar to a real ecosystem. There's a non-living component and also a living component, abiotic and non-abiotic components. So it's almost similar to that one. But the most interesting things we always see is the technical elements. So what are these? These are the deployment technology. By the way, I'll try to speak fast because I have 3 demonstrations. I'll try to fit it into our time frame. So the deployment technology, that's the one that deploys the malware. It can be an email. Before it was a floppy disk. It can be a USB drive. It could be a compromised website. Any technology that would deploy malware to a system. And the malware installer. New malware right now, they have different components, and one of their components is the malware installer. The malware installer itself is a separate technology. So some of you guys, when you get an infected or an email with a malicious attachment, usually that attachment is not the malware, but the deployment technology that installs the malware in the system. And we have the malware serving domains. So malware serving domains, these are websites or network resources that contains the malware itself or updates of the malware. So I'll later demonstrate that. And the command and control. So we hear this all the time, CNC. Command and control, it's a resource. It's not just a website or a domain, but command and control is a resource that when you change it, it would influence the malware's behavior. And the drop zone. Drop zone is where the stolen information is being dropped. It can be a local hard drive, an email, or a domain. And of course, the malware components. These are the things that infect your host. So let's see all of them in action. First, it starts with the deployment technology. It can be an email, an infected USB, or a floppy drive. From there, usually it contains the malware installer. And there are 2 kinds of malware installer. We have the dropper and the downloader. The dropper, usually it's bigger in size because the malware components is already included in that file. While a downloader, it's very small and the malware files are not there, but instead it checks a malware serving domain for the malware files and then downloads it to the infected host. So it's like installing Flash. You're actually downloading, let's say, 64 KB of file, but then when you execute it, it would go to getadobe.com and then it would download all of the Adobe files. So usually before installation, it would first check whether there's an updated malware in the malware serving domain. If there's none, then it would not do anything unless if it's a dropper. If it's a dropper, it would just install what it has, what it's been carrying. And once it installed the malware components are actually different executables, or it could be different files. Unlike the malware we see before, wherein everything is combined into one file. So if you get infected, you just see one file. But nowadays, it's a whole different story. Everything is being broken down into different components. And these different components have different functions. The advantages of this for the attacker is that they could easily update one component without disrupting the whole infection cycle. So we have the configuration file. Usually the configuration file contains the directive or the network resources the malware need. And it also contains the latest command from the CNC. We also have the attack component. The attack component can be a keylogger, it could be a Trojan. It depends on the directive of the attacker. If he just wants to steal information, the attack component could have those features, like the one I mentioned, keylogging, RAM scraper, desktop image capture, and other information stealing capabilities. There's also the regeneration component. I usually call this the Horcrux, if you're familiar with the Harry Potter. So the regeneration component, usually it's hidden. So what it does, it depends on how long it's configured. It could check every hour, every day, every boot up, whether the malware is still there. If it's not there, it will restore it. That's why we call it the regeneration component. And of course, the more popular rootkit component. It's the component that makes sure the malware is not seen in the system. And the one that's becoming popular, I think for the past 5-7 years, is the bot agent. The bot agent itself is the one that added network capabilities to malware that we've been seeing before. It's the one responsible for communicating to the malware serving domain to check whether there are updates on the malware. If there are updates, let's say the attacker wants to send a new command. The bot agent checks for that, and then it updates the right components. One of the components it usually updates is the configuration file. Another thing it does is that it sends status reports to the command and control. Usually when you get infected, the first thing the malware will do is collect all of the system information you have and then send it out and say, I just infected this machine located in Michigan with MAC ID this, with this kind of programs installed, this version of browser installed. And of course, the CNC also sends commands back to the malware. And usually if the malware is an information stealer, it would need to have drop zones. There's usually three kinds. We have the local hard disk, we have email, and we have the drop zone domain. The local hard disk, before spyware, its drop zone is the local hard drive. The main advantage of this is that it's very easy to get that stolen information. But of course, you have to have access to the physical machine so you could get that information. But of course, this is good if you're spying on your spouse or your kids. But if you want to really spy on other people, then this is not a good way to do it, because then you would have to have a backdoor component to break into that machine and get all of those information. And what if you've infected 1 million people? It's like breaking in 1 million times to their machine just to get information. That's why the attackers came up with email. So they would get all of these bits and pieces of information, send it out to the attacker, and then he just collects it. But of course, email is not really organized when it comes to information. So what usually happens is that the attacker gets 10,000 emails a day and he doesn't know what to do with them. It's not organized. So they came up with a domain drop zone. So the domain drop zone, it's similar to a CNC wherein they would have a control panel. All of the information is collected in a centralized server. They could just parse whatever information they need. So what are the commonly used malware technologies? We have the DIY kits. Malware before, when I first seen them, you usually code them in assembly. But nowadays, most of the malware are created through kits, which I will show you later in my demonstration. So the most popular, the Zeus, SpyEye, and of course, armoring tools. Armoring tools make sure that what you created cannot be detected by AV. So the more popular is the SAW6. So usually it encrypts the malware, packs it, make sure it's different in form, but the functionality remains the same. So that's why when you get an infection, you send it to your AV, let's say your favorite AV company. Then they say, yeah, this is detected, but then the next day, still the same thing is happening, and then you send the same thing again to your AV, and they say, yeah, we'll provide you with a solution in the next couple of hours, but then the next day it happens again. Why is that happening? I'll show later in my demonstration also. Another popular armoring tool is the file joiner. So malware before, they infect files. So they infect files, they append themselves to that file. So if it's a gaming file and you share it, every time somebody uses that game, he gets infected. But nowadays, malware don't have the infection routine they used to have because probably the malware writers are becoming lazy. So what you can do is you could have a file joiner. It's like the infection routine in a tool. So if you create a Trojan, get a very popular executable, join them together, share them in file sharing sites or in your, or just send them out to friends, and you have a malware that's packed in a very popular executable, and then it will be easy for them to execute it. And of course, old malware samples. So with these tools, like the armoring tools, old malware samples or even codes can become undetectable again. So I call it recycling malware. I had a presentation, I think it was in GrrCON, wherein I showed how old codes and old malware is being recycled. I call it green malware, made from 100% recycled malware. So it still works, because most of the technology is there. Their main concern is just to deploy it and nobody detects it, and then it will still do its job. As I just mentioned, the old malware codes. Now, what are the commonly abused technologies? So when it comes to the technical components of malware, if it's purely bad, it's easy to take down because nothing will get affected by it. So let's say I have a server in an Asian country which is doing bad stuff. If they discover that server, they could just take it down, and that'll affect me significantly. But what if I abuse common technologies like email? Email, you could send email attachments, just create a fake Google account, MSN account, or whatever, send it out. They can identify the email you used, but they cannot really take down Google or Live or Hotmail. Another thing is web hosting. Most web hosting is free. So what you can do is you just need an email address, and that's it. You could create a free web hosting account. Even if it gives you 25 meg of free space, that 25 meg is already enough to host multiple malware with the size of, let's say, 500 KB. And malware scanning services. So the bad guys also have what they call a quality assurance. They make sure what they create is not detected by AV. So there are lots of services out there. We have the No Virus Tanks, and also we have Virus Total. But they don't use Virus Total because once they send it out to Virus Total for checking, that gets distributed to AV companies, which defeats their purpose. But with No Virus Tanks, there's actually an option there that says do not distribute the sample. But of course, we're not sure whether they're really not distributing it. So sometimes they have their own implementation with them. There's actually a tool, I forgot to bring it, wherein it is a collection of different AVs. All of them are cracked, and they use that. And sometimes when they QA their creation, let's say if they're targeting company A using antivirus B, if based on their QA, it's detected by antivirus C, antivirus A, antivirus D, but it's not detected by antivirus B, then for them, that's okay. Probably they just need a small window of time to plant whatever they need there so that they can have access and they can do anything they want. Also, social networks. So Twitter can be used as a CNC, which I will also demonstrate later. And of course, Facebook. If you have friends that they have on their wall that says, I just want an iPad 3, check out this link, chances are they're infected. And then when you click on that link, it'll post on your wall, and then it will post messages on your friend's wall. The advantage of this is that there's trust. When it comes to this infection vector, there's trust, because you would think, oh, my friend post this in his or her wall, so probably it's legitimate, so I'll click on it. And one thing I've seen this in a couple of malwares at the website visitor counting services. So most malware or botnets, they would have a control panel wherein they could enumerate how many hosts are infected and from which countries. But some of them don't have that luxury, so they use this free service, the online count. Online count actually gives you a piece of code that you could add to your website so that whoever visits your website, the location of the visitor would be recorded. And all of that GUI is presented to you by online count. So what one malware writer did is that he created a website which is benign, there's nothing there, but it has the online count code. So whoever visits that website, the information of the visitor will be recorded. And what he did, his malware, when it's active in the system, it would actually activate a process of Internet Explorer to visit that website. It's just the process, not the window, so you don't see anything. So every time it visits that website, it collects the information of your machine. So what he does is that he just opens his online count account, and then he would see there 10,000 from the US, 1,000 from China, 300 from Russia, and from wherever countries those hosts come from. So he has a control panel that he could actually say how many hosts are infected and from which countries, and he didn't even do anything. He didn't even invest any technical effort to create that. The human elements. So of course, behind the technology, there are humans that are profiting and providing all of this technology. We have the sponsor, the technology providers, the cybercrime boss, the money mules, and those four, actually when you break it down, let's say the sponsor. The sponsor, it can be a government, commercial organization, non-commercial organization, activist groups. Usually this is the individual with the money. This is the individual that would say, okay, I need to do this, but I want to be discreet about it, so I pay somebody else to do it. And then the technology providers, the one I showed before, those technology providers could be divided into different groups. The smartest of them all are the malware writers. These are the original malware creators. Before, in the 90s, you could actually talk to these people in IRC channel saying, I'll give you this amount of money, can you create me this malware? But of course, they got smart because some of them get arrested every time they talk to a conference wherein there are laws against malware writing. So they came out with kits. So now they commoditize their skills by selling kits. So you don't get to interact with them. They just provide the kit to a website and say, okay, just pay me this amount of money through Western Union. I'll give you access to the kit. Or if you have already gotten the kit, I'll give you a key so you could activate all of the functionalities of that kit. And then the deployment providers. The deployment providers, they're the ones who actually provide the things to deploy the malware. So some of these are also executables. That's why when you notice when you get infected, when you execute a file, suddenly it disappears in your system, but then you get infected. The reasoning behind that is that it doesn't want to leave any trace, because that piece of software can be sold over and over and over again. It can deploy different kinds of malware. So whoever owns that technology also wants his malware installer to be undetected, because if it gets detected, nobody will buy that deployment technology from him anymore. And of course, the botnet master. So we often hear the term botnet master, botnet controller, botnet operator. So it can be an individual or it can be a group of people. So usually a botnet operator is someone who's actively operating or controlling the botnet. He could probably just have a slice of the botnet. He's probably someone who just rented, let's say, 1,000 infected machines. So that guy is called the botnet operator. The guy who really owns the whole botnet, he's called the bot master. And the resilience provider, these are ones who provide resiliency when it comes to their network resources. So some of them, the more popular ones, are what we call the bulletproof hosting, wherein anybody can do anything in that particular hosting company. As long as the hosting company gets paid, they don't really care what you put in their hosting services, whether it's malicious or not, they really don't care. And most of these bulletproof companies or domain hosting companies are located outside the US. There's one actually that was, when I used to live in San Jose, there was one, he was a Russian student. He actually put up a bulletproof hosting company, but then the FBI got to him and he got arrested. Botnet operator, the one I just mentioned. Sometimes I'm getting ahead of myself. And of course, the crime boss. The crime boss is the one that runs the show. Usually most of these people, the technology providers, most of them, they don't know each other. Only the crime boss know who to contact. So some of these, they operate sometimes through email, through chat. So their level of collaboration is really, really good. They don't even know each other. So the crime boss puts them all together so the sponsor could get what he needs. So the sponsor actually pays the crime boss, which I will show later how the money is flowing. And of course, there's also a job for us, like the money mules. These are the unsuspecting public that think they have a legitimate work from home job, but in fact, they're working for a cybercrime outfit. The malware economy. So usually, when it comes to the flow of money, it starts with the stolen information. So the stolen information is sold to the public, or sometimes sold to a special buyer who has a need of that information. In the malware economy, the stolen information is only worth what the buyer is willing to pay. So like credit card numbers, it's very easy to get credit card numbers nowadays that before, when you troll the underground, you could see them selling one credit card number for $10. Now they just sell it in cents, 5 cents, 10 cents. They even give you a free sample. First 10 numbers are free if they work, buy the rest for this amount of money. And the sponsor, he pays the cybercrime boss, because the cybercrime boss, it's like Leverage, if you're familiar with that series. So Timothy Hutton is the cybercrime boss. It's similar to that one. And then the cybercrime boss spreads the money around to the different technology providers. Of course, he gets the profit. And sometimes the technology providers, depending on the arrangement, sometimes they work exclusively with the cybercrime boss, or sometimes they go on their independent ventures. They could sell their kits to anyone who has the money, or they could probably work with other cybercrime bosses. So how is stolen data monetized? So you have stolen data, it's advertised, usually it's in hacker forums or in Pastebin, and then somebody buys it, and the payment is processed by common people. These are the money mules. So if you get an email saying if you have a bank account and you can work 2 hours a day to process payment, you get 25%, chances are that's a money mule scheme. And then you'll just realize that since they're using your bank account to accept payment, and then you withdraw from your bank account, use a Western Union money, which nobody can trace, probably you'll just get surprised when the FBI come knocking on your door because your bank account is being used for fraud. And then once the payments are collected, it's sent to the attacker. Now, how advertising stolen data is quite easy. If you have Google, you could just search this, dumps, mailer site, pastebin.com. Then you could see this. So one US Visa Master, $4, Amex Discovery, $4. And the seller have an email, oscaryun@yahoo.com. That's his ICQ number, YM. So if you want to contact him with that number, you could easily do it. And he even says there, we are both here to make money, so respect us like we respect you. Let's get paid together. In God we trust. So at least they have ethics or something. Now, how do they recruit finance managers? Usually you'll get a posting like this, sometimes not through email, but through legitimate websites. They would even sometimes post it in Monster or Hot Jobs. But chances are, if you see something like this, it's a money mule scheme. So that's it for the presentation. Again, you can follow me through Facebook, LinkedIn, and at Tops. Now let's go to the fun stuff, the demo. I need to turn on my internet just to be sure everything works. So as I mentioned before, there are kits. So some of us would get the statement from our AV vendors that we've received 55,000 unique samples a day, or for the past year, there were 20 million unique samples. But basically, the way they define unique is through hashes. And that's a good way. That's not a good way to define uniqueness. Because what the attackers do right now is that they actually automate the creation of malware. That's why some of the malwares we see, some of them, they really don't spend time in encrypting it, because once you detect it, they would just send a new one. So like for me, this system, this is an automated system that creates malware. I actually call this the malware factory. So we have the builder here, and currently we have 0 malware sample. So I just do this, and then it would create a malware sample for me. Oops, I think the resolution messed it up. Let me just fix it here. There. So while I was for this, I'm actually using a workspace macro. So once you move something, the automation gets messed up. So we have to do it again. So now it's counting 4, 5. So what the malware writer would do, or the one who wants to have an army of malware, he could just have one VM running, automate his tools, go for a cigarette break, come back. He'd probably get like thousands of malware. And then he could attach each one of them in separate emails and deploy them. So that's why when you get an infected email, the sample that you have there in terms of hash, you wouldn't see it in any other emails again. So when you just identify malware through hashes, it's already a failure. And when we look at this, when we look at the form and structure of this, and also the code, it's totally different. So traditional signature-based won't work anymore. Okay, then we can stop this demo. So let's say we were able to produce, let's say 1,000 samples a day. Those 1,000 samples can be multiplied exponentially by using an armor tool. So we could get one from that sample, run it in an armoring tool, which produces 1,000 samples, and then the second sample, run it in an armoring tool, which would also produce another 1,000 samples, which is totally different from each other. And you have an army of malware that have the same capabilities, but when it comes to detecting them, would really, really be a challenge. Oops. So the next thing I'm going to show is how we use common technologies as a CNC. So before I do that, I need to connect to the internet so we could see it live, and then all right, while we're waiting for the internet to connect, this is actually a Twitter account that is used as a CNC. So when you look at all the tweets here, they look normal, right? It's like just your round-of-the-mill tweets. But actually, these tweets are CNC commands that would influence the malware that's running in the host. So let's say you've already created 1 million samples and you want to spread them around. So aside from using it in an email, you decided to embed it in a PDF file. So sometimes you would you could get an infected PDF file in an email. It's an innocent-looking PDF file, but once you execute it, it actually executes something in your system. This one is neutered. This is a neutered malware. It doesn't do anything, so we won't infect anybody. But and it's actually revealing itself. But in the real world, it won't reveal itself. It will be running in the background. Even if you turn this, if you turn off this file or close it, it's still there. So what it does is it continuously looks for an update from its CNC. So to help us understand the CNC command, it actually uses keywords. So these are the keywords. So every time it sees these keywords, Twitter, talents, concert, link, OMG, innocent, happy, it would do those. Twitter, activate key logging feature. Talents, patch vulnerability. The main advantage of patching the vulnerability it uses an infection vector is that it wants exclusive access to your system. If you have a system with multiple malware infection running in your system, it would slow down your system, and then it will cause you to suspect that there's something going on in your system. The good thing about having a malware that patches vulnerabilities is that once you reverse engineer it, you could actually know how to patch that vulnerability. And then you can share it to the software vendor and then hope and pray that they do something about it and not wait for 2 months. So let's say, let's activate the key logging capability of the malware. Hopefully the internet is fast enough. So this sample is designed to actually display a message instead of doing something. So this Paul checks this Twitter account every 5 seconds. So every time it doesn't see anything, it just says there, I'm an innocent looking file waiting for an update. Oh. All right, it's there. It's showing already. I love Twitter. Now let's see if the malware will see it. So I'm using Sprint 4G, so this should be fast. Oops, I think I just turned it off. Let's just execute it again. See there, now it says key logging feature activated. So let's say we want to set the malware server. So the main idea of this is that anything can be a CNC. As long as there's data and that data can be translated by a malware, it can be a CNC. So one real example of this is that when we see spammed emails and the timing is perfect, for example, when people are waiting for the iPhone 5 to be released, if I'm a malware writer, I could just monitor Apple's website to see if there's an announcement that iPhone 5 is already available. And if it is available, I would immediately activate my malware, send spam to everyone and saying, okay, you just won an iPhone 5, or you won a raffle to be first in line for the iPhone 5, click on this link. So now it's set it to the malware server is to this. And the advantage of this is that Twitter has a shortening service. So when it comes to domain blacklisting, this is a good way to obfuscate it. So I have a good topic on this on URL obfuscation in my book, the one I showed you guys earlier that hopefully you will buy for my kids. So I have a topic of this on URL obfuscation. Some of them, they just use everyday tools that we see on the internet that are offered for free, that we take for granted. But when it comes to the attackers, that's a tool chest or a treasure chest for them. So let's say your malware is detected and it's becoming noisy because researchers are picking it up, the media is picking it up, and the sysadmin of the company is deciding, I'll do an audit in my system. So if I'm the malware writer, what I can do is I could just deactivate this so it would remove all traces of it running. Of course, they won't shut down the server. They would do an audit live. So once I do that, they won't find anything anymore. And then I could just time it to wake up again, let's say in a couple of days from now, or on a specified date, let's say April 4 or April 13 or some date in the future. So for this one, the keyword is happy. All right, our internet is still working, so that's good. This is actually my second Twitter account because it seems that sometimes I think they have a way of knowing whether a certain user account has been used so many times already for this. So let's see if it would still activate. It won't work anymore because when we put there the keyword happy, it would kill itself, and even if you run it manually or somebody else wants to test it in their sandbox, their automated sandbox, it won't do anything. So if you rely on automation and you have a malware like this and you have no idea what that malware is capable of, you'll get an output of nothing. And then if you have automated systems that make sense of that output, it would make sense of nothing. So these are the challenges that are facing some of the researchers today. And that's it for my presentations. If you guys have any questions, I think we still have like 10 minutes or so for questions. And hopefully I can answer them. This one, it's very difficult to detect because even the network protocols, it's similar to a Twitter protocol. If it uses any network resource that's legitimate, that's the challenge when it comes to detecting these. And even if they detect it, they could say, okay, they zero in on Hacksaw as the one that's CNC. Nothing's preventing the malware writers to actually generate on the fly Twitter names that the hacker already has in his possession. So if you guys are familiar with DGA's domain generation algorithm, like Configure, it generates 50,000 domain names a day, Configure C. You could also do that here. It could generate 50,000 random, or it's not really random because there's an equation behind it. It could generate that, and then a standalone tool of that could be in the possession of the attacker. So he will know, okay, exactly by this date, by this time, this is the one being reached out to by my creations, because I designed them to reach out to the 25th name that it will generate. So if I need to communicate with them, I will use that 25th name. And when it comes to detection, yeah, when it comes to network detection, it would be hard. But of course, there are certain rules for this. Like for example, nobody's in the office and you see a massive Twitter communication. So that's already a telltale sign. The key here is that you understand the threat. So if you understand the threat, what's the capability of the malware, what it does on the network, then you can always come up with a solution for this one. Any more questions? And by the way, if you have time, visit our booth, RSA NetWitness, so you could see how our product works. And if there are no more questions, thank you for listening to my talk. And hopefully I gave you something that you can take with you when you go back to your work.